J6, January 6th, was a setup. Well, let me explain. What is a setup? On this morning, we did a usual morning live YouTube live stream. And people said invariably, it was a setup. I said, what do you mean it's a setup? Well, it's a setup. It was, and people will always repeat what they say. What do you mean it was a setup? I mean, it was a setup. I didn't say I didn't hear you. What do you mean by setup? I mean, they incited it. They incited it? You mean all those people, the guy with the eye patch and the Proud Boys and this and the guy with the Valkyrie helmet and the Sonny Bono vest and all these other people, they what? Did they not do this of their own accord? Who incited Ashley Babbitt? The only murder, by the way. The only death. Excuse me, pardon me. They incited this? The Fed? Who? The Feds? Who? Biden? Who? Well, and again, it gets into this imprecision. So did anybody incite them? No, they were announcing this forever, up to and including Trump, who didn't commit insurrection, but he was sure as heck saying, make your voice be known. Gee, imagine that. How un-American. Make your voice known. Make your thoughts known. Wow. Okay. So to make a long story very, very, very short, was it incited? Was it a setup? No. Was it exaggerated? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They were ready for this. They knew this. When I mean they, shadow government, Biden administration, whoever you want to call these people. They knew this from the get-go. They knew exactly, because Trump was, excuse me for saying this, stupid enough not to understand and not to read how his enemy works. He never really understood how treacherous these people were. And not only that, it became the national pastime to just get Trump at all costs. Everybody, they're still looking for the scalp. They're still looking for that scalp they can put on the wall. You know what I mean? That thing that says, I got him. Alvin Bragg in that disastrous, the first case, whatever the hell that was, that thing's just been forgotten. Now there's this civil case with Letitia James, and that one's whatever. And we'll talk about that later. That's another story. But here's the way it is. They won him absolutely off of the ballot. They never want to risk another Trump presidency. They never want to have to steal legally. Because remember, it was stolen. 2020 was, but legally. There was, I mean, come on. Don't even tell me anymore. But it doesn't matter. It's moot. It's moot. They did everything. The reason why they wanted to, remember, the second impeachment was to make sure that they could invoke this clause, so to speak, that says, in the event he were to be convicted, he will never be able to run for office again. Okay, so then they're using the 14th Amendment, Sections 3, but 4 and 5 should be looked at as well, in order to keep him off the ballot. And what they're doing is they're taking what happened on January 6th, and they're extrapolating it. They're pumping air into it. They're exaggerating it to the point of lunacy, sheer and utter lunacy. They're just building this thing and build it. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. Again, what he did was, I think it was stupid. But last time I checked, I don't think stupid was a grounds for either being kept off the ballot or criminally prosecuted. In fact, one would argue that you have to be stupid or crazy to want to be president in the first place. So they did this stuff. So do you mean the guy with the eye patch and the Proud Boys and all these people? They did this on their own. Now, there were a number of people. There were like 1,100, 1,200 people charged with it. Some were charged with criminal trespass of the Congress. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's tough though when the police are saying, "Come in." When do you know police to ever be too nice to you? We went to an event one time at the at the Congress, in this Congress that Mrs. L put on. And one time she was going in and she had a pencil case. And in that pencil case was, remember when you were a kid, paper, scissors, these special plastic scissors used to cut paper? She had some of that in her little pencil case. True story. They kept that. Now I don't know what I mean. What are you going to play? We're going to play rock, paper, scissors with this thing? DC is filled with cops. Secret Service, uniformed Secret Service, DC police, postal police, the congressional police, the Capitol police, this police, plus more law enforcement and military per square inch. And the real issue also is that Nancy Pelosi called off the National Guard or prevented them from being there. So it's very interesting. It's like, what if I set a fire? And before it gets to be a problem, you call the police, you call the fire department, the fire brigade, and you cancel it. Who committed the arson? Well, I did, but it would have been stopped had somebody called the fire department. But they didn't. But who's responsible for arson? Well, me, because do you have an affirmative duty to call the police? Well, one could argue yes. We don't know. So it was, number one, a factor of Nancy Pelosi deliberately. They wanted this thing to go as far. They knew they were going to extrapolate this and blow this up to proportions nobody had ever even seen before. That's kind of the setup. They knew what was happening, and they knew Trump and his cadre would be too stupid to recognize where he was going. There was not one charge of insurrection. Not one. Now, seditious conspiracy, that's a good one. That's actually a good one. If you read the statute, read what it is. A couple of people were guilty of that. Now, as far as sentencing goes, that's another issue. Where the sentence is extreme. Oh, in some cases, I'm not conversant with every sentence, but some of them absolutely. These people pose no threat whatsoever. What about the pretrial detention? Horrific. Shades of the gulag, shades of the Star Chamber. Absolutely horrible. Horrible and horrid. Okay. Then there's that. Then there's Ashley Babbitt. Who? Ashley Babbitt. Why didn't they allow her in? Isn't it funny? Why was she such a threat? Got to shoot her. But Valkyrie, man, no problem. Come on in. I don't understand it. In D.C., where they love to tell you, stop, don't go there, can't come in here. All right, that's it. Put up a barricade. All right, all you people, get out. Get out, turn around, you're not invited in. No, they said, come on in. Now, again, are you trespassing if you're allowed in? That's a tough one if that's what they were charged with. So we'll argue that. But let's go to the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment basically deals with three particular sections which I think are interesting. And that's being used to try to keep Trump off the ballot. Number one, Section 3. Section 3 was written, this particular section was written specifically to deal with the notion of post-Civil War insurrectionists. They don't want Jefferson Davis, running for whatever it is. Now, under the statute, under Section 3, believe it or not, it has been argued, and I think cogently so, that Trump could not be eligible for being disqualified from the ballot because any oath he took prior to this event was not as or for an officer status. He took an oath as the Commander-in-Chief, President, Article 2, not anything else. So believe it or not, if you read it, and that's one of the issues the Supreme Court is going to do is this really the best means available? That's number one. Number two, Section 4 speaks specifically to the Civil War and that Northern aggression because it deals with reparation and costs of servants and slaves, and they obviously were thinking about that. So one could argue that is another indication that this particular sections 3, 4, and 5 were applicable. And by the way, Section 5 makes Congress basically the sole, one could argue, tribunal of these particular issues in the first place. So clearly, we need the Supreme Court to say, sorry, you might be able to use Article 14 for other things as well, as officers or whatever, but not for the president. Sorry. Remember, you can be in prison. Remember Eugene V. Debs? So they really didn't care to get in the way of presidents not being able to run. You had to be 35, natural-born citizen. Don't get me started with that one. And you had to at least be a recurring resident of the country for 14 years or whatever. By the way, Herbert Hoover almost became ineligible because of that aspect of it. So that's where this thing is. Now, a couple of things to note. First, isn't it funny, and ask yourself, why was not one, as far as we know, why was Antifa or the Antifa operatives or the Antifa principals ever charged with what amounts to domestic terrorism? That's number one, during the George Floyd uprisings and riots and insurrection. Number two, why wasn't Black Lives Matter charged or investigated for anything? I mean, anything. They are the most punctilious when it comes to any type of behavior that Trump may have done, which is beyond the pale. But when it comes to the Biden family or his son, nobody seems to care. So, was January 6th a setup? No, because they were announcing this well in advance. The only setup is, I don't know what the setup was. But here's something too. As you know, in our world, we talk about MIHOPs and LIHOPs. MIHOP, the acronym for Make It Happen on Purpose, which is kind of a setup that you're talking about, and LIHOP, Let It Happen on Purpose. That's what this was. They wanted it to get as out of control as possible. They wanted to show these pictures and say that the United States, that the government was in real threat of being overthrown by these ragtag, cami-wearing, Gadsden flag-toting insurrectionists when nobody was charged with insurrection and when they could have stopped this but didn't. Remember the analogy. If you see somebody has started a fire, and you could have very easily picked up the phone and called the fire, or you still put it out, but you could have called the fire department and say, stop this fire, and stop it before it got, before one piece of furniture was even smudged by fire. Did you assist in this? It's called misprision, the willful not doing something, the non-performance. So many issues right here. But they saw Trump coming. And they never thought for their wildest imagination that it would go this far. And it would become this holiday of insurrection. When in fact it was nothing but a big kerfuffle and a big mass trespass. What do you think, dear friends? Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment as you see fit.